All right, in this particular video, we're going to start looking at things on the charts that equate to things on the ground or the things that you as a drone pilot should be looking for. The first thing we want to draw out to you is the yellow. In the last video, we were showing the chart basics in the Tampa Bay area. And if you remember, it was mostly covered in yellow, at least the ground was. It's because the Tampa Bay area is packed full of people. So when we're talking about large cities, they will go ahead and pretty much outline the exact areas that are populated. And so when you have large cities, they're usually polygons, and they can be in any direction or shape. If it's just a relatively large town or a city, a smaller city, it may be shown as a box on the chart. Now, over here on the left, where it says towns and villages for category 3, they have a small circle for towns and villages. These are relatively not as populated areas, but just a town or village. When you see on the right-hand side it says WAC, we're not going to worry about that because that's a world aeronautical chart, and that's something that airline pilots or commercial pilots might be using at higher altitude. So the things you want to be concerned with are the large cities above, the towns and smaller or larger towns, regular size or small cities, and the towns and villages being a smaller circle. All right, let's take a look at, we talked about already in the basics what Class Delta looks like. Now, Class Delta is shown here in the very top airspace. In this case, it looks like a keyhole. So they extended some of the Delta out on one side because they've got a zone over there where they've got an ILS approach for instrument landing at this airport, so they want to protect it a little bit more so that it's jutted out to the side. That's all Class Delta. You can't fly if you're in that area, and you'll notice that there's no broken space between the circle where the Class Delta would normally be and this extra little keyhole section that's off to the side. So they're saying all of that is Class Delta. And oddly enough, we know from previous discussions that normally they go up to 2,500 feet AGL. And in this case, you see it has the box there that we talked about before, and it says it goes up to and includes 2,700 feet. The next one, they're showing a Class Delta. You can tell because it's the blue chopped line, dash line over there on the right. And then they've got an extension, Class E, that goes all the way to the surface from that airport. Now, a lot of people get confused and think that you have to have a waiver or a LAANC approval to be able to fly in that area. But just by the fact that it is closed off from the Class Delta airspace, it is its own little entity. It's not part of the area designated for the airport. So it is not one of those Class E airspaces that you need a LAANC or a waiver in order to fly in. Now, in the Class Delta over here, that's a closed off blue dotted line, that you would need LAANC or a drone zone waiver approval. And in this case, the height of this particular Class Delta goes up to, but does not exactly include 2,700. So it would go up to 2,699 feet, and then that would be that. All right, so that pretty much explains Class Delta and what they can look like. Usually a circle, but not always. All right, so now we're going to look at same situation. At the top, you've got a Class Delta that goes up to and includes 2,500 feet. And you have an Echo extension out here that is okay to fly in. The Delta, no, but the Class Echo to the surface, yes. But then let's look below here where they're showing a Class Echo that goes all the way around the airport. Now that is designated for that airport, and because there's no break in it, and it goes out to the side here, you couldn't fly in any of that area without an LAANC approval, which stands for Low Altitude Authorization Notification Capability. You can get that off of an app on your phone, Aloft, Kitty Hawk. Gosh, there's a few of them out there. You can research, find out what's good for you. But once you get a LAANC authorization app on your phone, then wherever you're at, it locates you via GPS. It says you are here and you're inside of this Class Echo that goes to the surface, and it is part of this airport. So it would not be allowed unless you were able to get that LAANC authority. You could also go online to Drone Zone and get an actual waiver to fly for it. But don't forget, if you go online through Drone Zone, it could take up to 90 days to get that approval. Usually doesn't, but they want you to know that it could. So you want to make sure you have requested that type of approval well in advance if you decide to go online and not through the app. Now, this next groups of airspace you will see on charts, and at some point we're going to go back and revisit the Tampa Bay area, and we're also going to look at some charts from some other areas, and you're going to see this hazy kind of magenta line, and that is where Class Echo comes into contact with Class Golf, and it drops Echo down from 1,200 feet to 700 feet. And that's all that line says. The area on the inside, that's the hazier part, is where it comes down to 700 feet. The outside, where it's a thicker, darker color, is where it actually touches with Class Golf. So that would indicate that everything toward the inside of this circle, or sometimes it's not even a circle, you'll see that in the Tampa Bay area. It kind of looks like a set of Mickey Mouse ears right above Tampa Bay, but you'll see how that works later. And there's a few areas where Class Echo comes directly into contact with Class Golf that is higher than 1,200 feet, and that's when you would see this blue hazy line. I have never seen one. The entire country is pretty much covered in Class E at 1,200 feet. But this is where you would see the differences. You can find one of these edges. The darker side is where it comes into contact with Class Chi. And then the inside is where you have, or the lighter side of it, is where you have Class E dropping down to 1,200 feet. And then you have this sawtooth thing. This is all out in the water. It's offshore. You're not going to see this. And even if you did come into contact with it, you're going to be well below it because you're only allowed to fly up to and including 400 feet and nothing more. These are usually up more than 1,000, a couple of thousand, 3 or 4 or 5,000 feet. I've never seen them below like 5 or 6, 7,000 feet. So that's something we're not even going to worry about. It's not on the test. Don't concern yourself with it. All right, moving on. I love to beat dead horses, so in this case, we've got one that needs to be beat again. Class Echo. Can't say it enough, but if it goes to the ground around an airport, it is Class Echo that you cannot fly in without a waiver or a LAANC. So a lot of these airports, like these Class Delta airports, when they go ineffective sometimes because they're only part of the day that they're operating as a Class Delta. When they're not a Class Delta, a lot of them become Class Echo surface areas or Echo to the surface. And when that happens, you may not fly there without a LAANC or a drone zone as well. So even if you're planning a night flight around one of these airports that's a Delta that goes dark at night, that they close down their Delta operations, you need to check to make sure that they do not become a Class E surface area that is designated for the airport. Otherwise, you cannot fly there. Moving on, Class Bravo airspace. We got to see some of that in the basics of the charts video. I think that was the last video we had or the one before. But anyhow, we showed the thick blue line. And so here you can see the Las Vegas 20 nautical miles out. It's giving you information. It's showing you a radial off the inside, showing you a compass heading out of one of these layers. So it's a nav aid identifier. So that would be if they have a navigational aid like a VORTAC or a VOR at that airport, they might have a radial coming off of it. So you want to look for those. It doesn't necessarily mean that's a boundary layer for a Class Bravo, but you'll be able to tell the difference if it is. The outer limit is the only thing shown on a WAC chart, but we're not even going to look at WAC charts, so we're not worrying about that. This box that you see as we're continuing on down is for WAC or a WAC chart as well. We talked in the earlier video about the fractions. Here we have one that's 80/40. That would indicate that the ceiling of the Class B here is at 8,000 feet, and the floor of this particular piece of Class B is at 4,000 feet. And of course, that's charted MSL. Let's look at boxes. Anytime you have a box anywhere near where you're going to be flying, you should read it because there could be important information there. If you're using a two-way radio or even just an aviation receiver so you can tell what's going on at nearby airports, you may want to tune in and see what's going on with air traffic above a particular job you're doing. In this case, they're going to give you in the area, let's say if you were nearby this box that was on the map, it would tell you that the control, you would contact the approach or departure station at 121.1 or 257.8 in this area. So it kind of gives up the actual frequencies that you would need to be working on or listening to. Anytime you see boxes, check them out, read them, especially if they're close to an area you're going to be working in. Now, in this particular case, we're not going to focus in on this. Class Charlie works just like Class Bravo. The only difference is it's usually a bit smaller airports. Here in the Tampa Bay area, it's the difference between Tampa International and Sarasota International. Tampa International, obviously a big airport, lots of travelers coming in and out of there. Sarasota, pretty big, lots of airline planes in and out of there, but they're like regional carriers for the most part. Yeah, they do call themselves an international airport, but not as much international travel there, and more regional aircraft and smaller jets and that sort of thing. So they're not as busy. Again, we call C Charlie. We also call it congested. It's the middle in between Dinky Delta and busy Bravo. But they work the same way. There's a thick magenta line instead of a blue line. They have the same types of fractions, and you add the two zeros just the same. The only one that's different here, if you look below the little fraction on this one, is the T over the SFC. And the T says that it goes from the surface, that's the FSC, but it goes up to, but does not include the class of a class, it doesn't include the floor of the Class B above it. So this is when a Bravo lays over the top of a Class Charlie, and they want you to know that this particular zone will go up to, but not include, the area of the Class B. So that's what we want you to know there. There's one other type of airspace that's kind of a relic of the old airspace from back when I started flying manned aircraft when I was about 18 years old. This was back in 1985. They had ARSAs and TERSAs. TERSAs still exist out there. There's only a handful of them, very rare. We have one here in Florida at Palm Springs. We've got, I think, one more somewhere that I know I've run across before, but not important. What's important is they look the same as like a Class Charlie or Bravo. They're a thick gray line, though, and they're usually just one gray thick line outside of a Class Delta. A broken blue dash line will be in the middle of these usually. And the biggest difference is you do not have to advise when you're flying inside of the Tersa area, as long as you're not inside of the Delta portion of a Tersa. So you can't be in the dashed blue area and flying, because that's just like a Class Delta airspace. But these Class Deltas that have a Tersa around them, that is strictly your choice if you wish to operate with that. And in that case, you would have to, notify them. But again, as a drone pilot, it's not something we're going to notify them about, because your drone app is not even going to say that you need to have, contact with them. You're not going to have a waiver to fly here. And nobody really wants to talk to a drone pilot at the tower anyway. They really leave that up to the apps and the web pages, like Drone Zone, for you to talk to. But just like every other major airspace, it has the fraction that tells you where it starts and ends. And again, we add the 2 zeros for it. When you see these type of boxes with these, I don't know, you want to call like comb teeth, kind of look to it around the outside. These are really important that you check into these. In this case, you have P areas, R areas, and W. So the P is prohibited, and that's usually there because of some kind of national security issue. The R's are restricted, and they're usually restricted because of some kind of military activity, and it could include artillery and fast jet flying kind of stuff, and aerobatics and things. So you really don't want to be in there anyway. And then you've got warning areas, which, they're just trying to make sure everyone knows that there could be extra activity, and usually some type of military. Your alert areas are trying to tell you that you could have stunt flying, aerobatics, training maneuvers for different types of aircraft. It could be parachutes in that area. It could be glider activity. So a lot of reasons an alert area could be up. The prohibited and restricted, by the way, I want to go back to that for a second. Those you're not flying in unless you get permission to fly in them. The warning area you can fly through. You don't have to contact the controlling agency. Alert areas you can fly through. There is not usually anyone that is a contact there unless it's a parachute operation. But you can fly through there as long as you're being careful. You're being more vigilant. And then there's MOAs down here. MOAs have a name, whereas you can see the previous ones, the P's, the R's, the W's, and the alert areas, the A's, all of those have a number identifier. MOAs have a name. And so this, again, is a military operations area. You do not require, any kind of approval to go in there. But again, high vigilance. It's recommended you be very, very careful and hypervigilant if you fly in those areas. And then we have military training routes, much of the same. These are just routes that go through, they're flying from one location to another, and this is on the way to, you're going to see these gray lines and an IR or a VR to determine whether it's instrument that they're flying or visual. And then, of course, you have military activity areas, these SMARs, and they act, as far as their fractions are concerned, similar to the other fractions we've seen where you add some zeros. Again, they're not prohibited or restricted, so they're not regulated. You may fly in there, but again, special military activity could be going on in there. You want to make sure you're being vigilant. When you see these light blue and light pink airways through an area, what you need to know as a drone pilot is these are areas where there could be concentrated additional air traffic. They're Class Echo airspaces, but again, that is not regulated for drones. There's nothing for you to be concerned about, and they're up above the altitudes that you're going to be flying at anyway. So there's nothing that you need to be concerned about other than you might want to just be looking out. There may be additional, or a lot more in some instances, aircraft flying through that area. So if you are, maybe doing tower inspections and you're going to be up at a higher altitude than say 1,500 feet, that's when this would become an issue. You just would want to know that there's a probability more aircraft will be flying through this area. And by the way, on a airway, they are from the center line outward 4 nautical miles on either side. So they cover a swath of 8 nautical miles total from one side to the other. All right, we're going to stop there, and there'll be a second part to this video coming up. And you'll just check out the next video to continue on from where we're leaving off.